Hey everybody, welcome. It's Friday. It's time to hang out and talk about Stargate. I'm glad that you guys are all here, or if you're watching us after the fact, I appreciate you being here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. My special guest today is Edward Gross, who is the author of Chevrons Locked. It's that book. It's right behind me. You know what? I have another copy right here.
Nice.
This is the oral history of Stargate. And Ed, we're going to talk about Stargate today, but you're also a huge science fiction fan. We're going to hang out and talk about all things sci-fi, Star Trek, Superman, whatever comes up, whatever folks here in the chat want to talk about. So welcome. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today.
Thank you. I was looking forward to it as well. So this is great to finally be here.
You were I want to get into your history as a sci-fi fan, but you came to Stargate, I think, through this project, right? Through Chevrons Locked. And so we met when you were working on the book, which we'll talk
Right.
about. And I got a chance to be a part of it, which I'm very grateful for. But it's fun. I commend it to everybody. I wanted to spend a whole hour talking about this book, even though it's been out for a couple of years now, just to commend it to folks as sort of an invaluable resource for the history of the Stargate production.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being a part of it, because that's one of the biggest thing I have is any of these oral histories I do. I want I want to get other voices in there besides the people that made the projects that I'm writing about. I like the idea of having the sort of leaders in the community, if that makes sense, to sound off as well, to get that perspective in there. It's always really been important to me. So having both you and David in there was wonderful.
Yeah, David Reed and I have been doing kind of accidental history of Stargate production just as a fan site, right? Working on Gate World when the shows were in production and doing interviews with cast and crew was, we weren't thinking of it as documenting the history of the production, but that's what it's ended up being right now that that archive of interviews is 20 years old. And now David has started Dial the Gate, which is in its sixth season. He started in
Wow.
2020. He started during COVID as an oral history project, as a let's get the people to tell the history of the shows in their own words and their experiences with their characters, with the episodes, etc. It's become this archive, and so David and I have ended up being kind of historians of the Stargate franchise, both the show and its mythology, and also the people in its production. So it was really exciting to me when you came along and said, "Hey, I want to do this book. It's an oral history project. It's an in their own words." And it's going to be a nice fancy hardbound book in print. It was exciting for Stargate, which is, admittedly not the biggest science fiction franchise in the world. We don't always get all the cool licensed merch and toys,
Right.
but to get this kind of unauthorized production history was super exciting.
Well, exciting to do too. And I watched Stargate when it was airing originally. So I was a fan. And the funny thing is, when I was dipping into my archives, because whenever I'm writing a book, I've been doing this for 40 something years. So I have plenty of interviews, that I've acquired. So I pull out the old cassette. Couldn't believe how many I had of Brad and Brad Wright and Robert C. Cooper. I had
Yeah.
so like 5 or 6 different interviews with them back then. I didn't even remember doing, like, mostly about universe, but it was just so funny to sort of make that discovery in while writing this one, finding all these old archived interviews. Like, wow, I covered Stargate much more than I thought I did.
That's
So
cool. Because you are an entertainment journalist by trade. You've been doing this for a while and
yeah,
covering lots of sci-fi and fantasy projects, lots of TV and film in your different projects, different work, different magazines and other publications. I want to get to all that. I want to get to sort of your the 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 history of your work and the different
okay.
publications that you've gone through. But let's start at the beginning, man. What kind of sci-fi fan are you? What was your show growing up as a kid? You grew up, I think, in the 60s and 70s. I grew up in the late 70s and 80s. What was the
Okay.
first show that kind of, got its hooks in you and sort of fired your imagination as a sci-fi fan?
Well, I mean, there are two shows. Well, one's not sci-fi, but two hit me at the same time. Basically, was Star Trek, the original. I
Yep.
was 6 when it debuted. And then the other was Dark Shadows, the horror soap opera that
Dark
was.
Shadows.
Oh my God! I mean, that show probably has more to do with me having morphed into being a journalist than anything else that I used to watch. Those were the two things though that just captured my imagination. Then there were things like Lost in Space and the sci-fi sitcoms or the fantasy sitcoms of the 60s, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, all that stuff. All of those things sort of pulled together to make me the sci-fi nerd that I am. On top of which is the big guy in the red and the blue behind me, Superman. That was another thing. All of these hit me at around the same time. So that's sort of what sucked me in and put me on the road to who I would be and what I would do.
Was it, we'll get to Superman, but I'm curious, was it through comics or was it through television or eventually film that Superman, that you found Superman?
I found Superman, I think I was in 65. This is the period like between 65 and 72 is the most sort of resonant thing in my brain about my memory of all these things that I fell in love with. But I was watching reruns of The Adventures of Superman, the George Reeves show. And at the end of the show, it said Superman is based on the adventures presented in DC Comics or magazines, right? Now, I didn't quite make the connection. And my father had a comic book about the history of dogs because he loved dogs.
Okay.
So I had this TV show, I had this comic book, and then I discovered that they were making these great comics based on the TV show, obviously not knowing it was the other way around, and just got hooked on Superman like immediately, and that has never left me. It's just been a part of my life since then. So it's yeah, 5 years old, I would say, is when
Wow.
it got me through the TV, and then the comic books, and then of course everything else that followed.
Yeah, and we've talked on the show recently about the middle school years, kind of that show that gets you when you're in middle school. Kind of 10 to 12 feels like the sweet spot. That's when I found Star Trek: The Next Generation. Having grown up on reruns of the original series, Next Gen, finally I was there, sitting in front of the
When it
TV
happened, right?
when
Yeah.
when Encounter at Farpoint aired, and it was, from the beginning that was my show. As much
Oh
as I love
yeah.
the original.
Oh, and I do. I mean, the original is my favorite. I mean, I say that. I actually, truth is, I think DS9, Deep Space Nine, is my favorite,
Really?
except for the fact that the original has Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and I just love those characters so much. But Deep Space Nine, I think, is a brilliant show. I mean, on so many levels. So, yeah. So I was there, but all of these shows were introduced, and I was certainly older. Like when Next Gen came, I was in my 20s and in fact, traveling out to California to do interviews with people about it and stuff. And that was sort of very early in my career. I was doing that sort of thing. So,
How
yeah,
did
I
you
was there.
yeah, how did you get into the business?
I mean, this goes back to that thing I said about Dark Shadows a minute ago. It's like I couldn't get enough of Dark Shadows, so I used to write my own little stories. They were terrible, but I wrote them.
Oh yeah,
Then I
I wrote
started
Star
writing
Trek fan
reviews.
fiction.
There you go, right? So we all did it at some point or another. And then I started writing reviews for myself, nobody else, which led to me wanting to do that for the school newspaper for middle school. And then I went to high school. And then so I knew pretty young that I wanted to be a writer of some sort. And the journalism thing just kicked in at such an early age. And I've been very blessed that I've been able to follow that. I mean, I made my first sale to a magazine called Daredevils Magazine. It's a little small press thing that I did, but then I sold to New York Nightlife Magazine and then to Starlog Magazine, and I became their New York correspondent for a number of years. And it just went from there. And it was just like I worked other jobs at that time, but it was so fortuitous that I could suddenly break in. And like with Starlog, especially, they kept using me over, every month. I was selling stories to them. So it just blew up from there. And it's like in the 90s, I was an editor on Cinescape magazine, which I don't know if you ever heard of or not, but
Yeah,
it was
sure have.
in its day, it was it was a great magazine. Um, and it just went from there. So I've just been very lucky. And then books entered the picture, and I started doing books, very crappy small press books for a publisher who is a shyster. Uh, but people tell me they love those books, these little thing called file magazines, they were called.
Okay.
And I did them on Star Trek and V and Dark Shadows and different things because nobody else was doing books like those. So people love them. And I hear from people that they actually really did love them. I look at them and like, eesh,
Yeah,
they're like
that's
an
great. Well, everybody's got to
embarrassment.
start
But
somewhere
yeah, exactly.
where they
But
found
no,
an
I'm grateful
audience.
for it all.
It,
You know?
I'm curious, as somebody who myself, I've kind of, right, been steeped in Stargate for over 25 years now, with my own website as my go-to publication, although I've done a little bit of freelance work for other outlets. So I'm really curious, like I've always loved all things science fiction. If it's,
Hmm.
got a spaceship or an alien or lasers, I will watch it. I won't necessarily like it, but I'll at least check it out.
That's
I
good. At least you give it
consume
a
like
shot.
pretty much everything, at least at some point, which is getting harder and harder today as prolific as TV and film has become. There's just so much
Oh, it's
content.
crazy.
But I'm just curious, right? Was it exploring other shows, right? Getting in your writing about V and all the other stuff that's going on in the world of science fiction, or maybe science fiction and fantasy? Is it the pressure of a job? Like, nobody's covering this show. I wasn't going to watch it, but now I'm interested in checking it out because it needs to be covered. Was it the pressures of the job, or what, were you just always sort of interested in everything in the genre in that way?
I mean, I wouldn't say everything in the genre, but most things. And that's the other thing I've been very, and I'm not saying it's the case all the way across, because I was the editor of a teen magazine of like teens, like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Justin Bieber and all that for
Nice.
15 years. Now I could care less, right? But you do
Right.
it because that's the job, and of course I would forget everything the next month. And when we were doing somebody else, I forgot everything I learned about these others. But these other things, like V, for instance, I still remember being in college and watching V in '83 and falling in love with it instantly. And I think, had just interviewed Kenneth Johnson, the creator of that, and I'm still in touch with Ken now.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny's, a friend, and I contact him every now and then. And so that's the point. I guess it's a roundabout way of saying is I love covering all this stuff, but I'm very lucky that I get to cover a lot of the stuff that I truly love. And you know what I mean? Like Star Trek, like Planet of the Apes, like anything. I have been very lucky. I keep using the word blessed, but it's true to do what you love and to be able to tap into the things you grew up with and write about them and speak to people about them.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. I mean, it's just. I was at work. I did a book called Planet of the Apes Revisited years ago. I co-wrote it, and I get a phone call. I was working at no, at Bauer Publishing, I guess, at the Bauer, the teen magazine thing, and I get a phone call, and Charlton Heston was writing the forward to the book, and I answer the phone, and all I hear is, Mr. Gross, I'd like to talk to you about your manuscript. And it was Charlton Heston. And it was just like, how mind blowing is that? You're just sitting at your desk and then Charlton Heston calls you. So I love all this stuff, and it's never gone away. And that's the exciting thing, is to get up every day and get in front of the computer and look forward to what the day is going to have to offer, what you're going to write that day.
That's
Now
amazing.
it's just, and to be doing it for so many years, that's the beauty of it. And I don't have to work at Costco or McDonald's and then do this on the side, so I've been very lucky, and I know a lot of people don't have that luck, so
Yeah, for sure.
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, if you love what you
I hope I
do,
answered your
you'll never
question.
work a day in your
I
life.
don't know.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
absolutely. Folks in the chat are chiming in, similar stories, similar backgrounds of shows that we discovered. I mean, I watched all the shows that you're listing, right? In reruns, of course. When I was a
Yeah,
kid in the late '70s, early '80s, I'm watching, reruns of Bewitched, and not thinking about the fact that it's science fiction.
right.
My favorite Martian, sure, there's a Martian in it. But
Right.
Bewitched, right? These things grab my imagination, and I love these shows. I guess looking back on it, because of the weird little genre twist to so much of television that was being produced. And then I also watched Gilligan's Island, because everybody watched Gilligan's Island.
You have to watch Gilligan's Island. I watched the Brady Bunch. I mean,
Yeah.
in its original run. I mean, I did, it's, again, you love the. But in the '80s, I also loved like Beauty and the Beast. There's a fantasy show, right? But I loved Beauty and the Beast. Ron Perlman and Linda Hamilton.
Hmm.
It was just one of those must-watch TV things, But that same time period, exactly the same years, CBS was also airing what is probably my favorite drama ever, is a show called Wise Guy, about an undercover cop starring Ken Wall. And I became friends with Ken Wall. So it's like, again, you fall in love with these things, you write about them, you tap into them in a variety of different ways. And I keep saying this, and people are going to get so bored. Okay, he's happy. We understand. But
No, it's a joy. It's a real pleasure to be able to love what you do and do what you
yeah,
love. Especially as a writer who's right. Often, if you're on freelance, you're kind of living project to project. It's,
right.
what can I sell this week that's gonna pay the mortgage.
Yeah,
Uh, before we turn to chat here and see what folks are saying, I forgot at the top of the show, I have to just give people a warning. I'm waiting for a very important phone call. So if we suddenly drop out, I'll just go back to the standby screen for a few minutes. I have to take this phone call if it comes during the show. I won't make Ed entertain you all by
please
himself
don't. Please don't.
with all of his knowledge of Stargate. So we'll just take a extended commercial break and come back if that comes. Foothill Climber in the chat says, I've never seen such a show with such an amazing level of continuing suspense as Dark Shadows.
There you go.
I didn't watch a lot of Dark Shadows, but it was an anthology series, wasn't it?
No, Dark Shadows was a
It
soap
wasn't.
opera. It
Oh,
ran
okay.
for 1,225 episodes from 66 to 71, Monday through Friday at 4 o'clock or 3:30, depending on where you were. And it was a horror soap opera. I
Horror
mean, it
soap
started off as
opera
a
one.
gothic mystery, and the ratings were terrible, and the show was going to get canceled. So the producer, Dan Curtis, said, you know what, let's go all out. Let's just add a vampire and we'll kill him in 6 months. That's all. We'll just get him in there and then kill
Like
him.
a gimmick for ratings?
Yeah, just to boost ratings, because they did a ghost and the ratings went up a little bit, and then they did a phoenix and the ratings went up again. So they said, all right, let's go for a vampire. But what happened is the audience fell in love with this character. So he knew he couldn't kill him. So they had to make him the first sympathetic vampire. And then Barnabas turns around and influences Lestat and Angel and Twilight and all these sympathetic conscience
Yeah,
filled vampires or angst
they
filled
found the
vampires.
angle.
They did. It's like, and Dark Shadows really started it. So it's. I know you don't know it, and it's a lot of people don't because it's so sort of.
I haven't seen an episode, but I'm aware of its existence. It's right
Yeah,
one of those that's a little bit before my time that I mean,
sure.
I wasn't a 6-year-old watching a soap opera, a horror soap opera.
The show came on in 66. I found it in 68. I came in the house for a minute and my mother was watching it and a werewolf jumped through the window of a tavern and I just dropped to my knees. And from that moment on, it was just like, oh my God, I'm home. So
Jeff at
it's,
Suns and Shadows says Dark Shadows also had a killer DVD box set of the entire series.
yeah.
Cheesy45 says everyone in my family used to run out of the room except for me when Barnabas was about to bite someone.
That's so funny. And the actor hated doing those scenes. He told me he felt like an idiot biting people, just opening his mouth to expose the fangs and do it. And that was the audience favorite, but he hated it.
That's good.
I'm so
Okay,
glad people like it or
we're
know
gonna
it.
get to Stargate in a minute, but Raj Luther also wants to know more contemporary science fiction. Have you watched shows like The Orville, The Expanse, Dark Matter, The Ark? What do you think of some of the more contemporary sci-fi?
Here's my biggest problem with contemporary shows, and this is not a criticism of them. I am so busy every day working, because my day job is covering classic TV for womensworld.com. And so I can't put on anything that I haven't seen already because it's background noise. And otherwise I start watching it and I don't get my work done.
Yeah,
So I haven't seen a lot of the new sci-fi shows, unfortunately, because I don't have the time to just sit down and watch them. I mean, I'm just watching Doctor Who now for the first time. I mean, and even that, I keep missing it and have to rewind it because it's on while I'm working. So it's really tough. But what I've seen of new shows, I do love the imagination behind them. Of course, I've seen the new Star Trek shows, but that goes without saying, I guess. Um, and I love the grittiness of a lot of the shows, the serialized aspect of it. Although I think this we could do a little pullback from serialization, I think, and get a little more standalone.
yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't have a lot to say about the new shows because I haven't really had a chance to watch them in depth. I watched The Orville for a while. I like that but again, that's like almost a tribute to Star Trek: The Next
Yeah, and
Generation.
that Star
So
Trek connection.
yeah, exactly. So so that's a feeling. I'm not against it. I like what I've seen of it. I just haven't seen a lot of it for the reason I just said.
Doctor Who, of course, is one of those shows that's been around, I mean, forever, since the
Yeah,
early 60s.
63 it
Did you
debuted.
watch it back in the day? Are you catching up on the
No,
modern
because
stuff, or are you watching
as a kid, I
classic?
thought I'm watching the stuff starting like 2005 when Christopher Eccleston's came in and they rebooted the show basically for, after a number of years being off. I think it was off since 89 or something.
Yeah.
No, when I was a kid, it was funny because Dark Shadows was cheesy, right? But I loved it and I didn't care. I'd see commercials on PBS for Doctor Who. And it was so cheesy looking to me then, even as a kid. I was like, I'm not going to watch it. Even though the thing I was loving was as cheesy as you can get in terms of how it looks. But it sweeps you in. So no, I didn't. I did not watch much of it. And
Oh,
until,
funny.
like I say, until recently, I'm just sort of discovering Doctor Who now because my editor, we had some success with the thing about a recent spinoff they did. So my editor said to me, "Why don't you do something on Doctor Who?" It's like, all right, I'll dive into it and I'll figure. And I found a Doctor Who historian who's been filling my head with information about Doctor Who
Good.
now. Now I'm like so excited about the show. His documentaries are like 2 hours long each. about each Doctor, and it's like I can't stop watching them. They're great. So
Oh
it's like
yeah,
I'm
I
really
watched a
becoming
series on
obsessed.
YouTube that was, yeah, long form documentaries on each individual Doctor. I watched all the way
Was
through those.
that? I wonder if this is the same guy.
Might be
Richard
the same.
Carrier, Clever Dick Films is the name of the his YouTube channel, and he's just phenomenal. He just does a great documentary, and he's done dozens of them. So it's yeah. So anyway,
That's
it's a
great.
long answer to the
That's
question,
funny
but
that as a kid
so
you
much
thought
fun.
that it was too cheesy based
I
on the
know, isn't it?
ads. Because it was, I
Right.
mean, okay, so here in the US it was an import. It was mostly on PBS stations, local public broadcasting, not on any big networks. So I grew up, right. Tom Baker was my doctor, the fourth
Hmm.
doctor. When I was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, it was on PBS, and I didn't have control of the remote. In fact, we didn't have remotes. You had to get up off the couch and turn the
You were the
dial on the
remote.
television to channel
You were
10.
the remote.
So I watched what my parents put on, and this looked fun, and I loved it, but I also didn't notice when it wasn't there. I guess I don't know
Right.
how frequently we watched it, but I watched Star Trek reruns all the time. I watched the shows that we talked about. I Dream of Jeannie, Lost in Space reruns, uh, but Doctor Who kind of fell out of my consciousness for
They were
years.
also on every day, remember. The reruns of these shows you're talking about were on every day, Monday through Friday. You could watch these shows, right? Star Trek, 6 o'clock every night here in New York. All these shows, Genie and Bewitched and all that stuff. You just go through the channel back then when syndication was booming for these old sitcoms. They were everywhere, so you could watch them constantly.
But now it's all retro, right? We watched a couple of Tom Baker serials on one of these free streaming services with my 17-year-old daughter, and she
Mhm.
just loved it. How
That's
retro
great.
it was.
How retro it was. Yeah, my son caught me watching Dark Shadows once, and he looked at me and he goes, "What is this crap?" I'm like, "Crap." I said, "Be an 8-year-old and being blown away by that. You never let it go. Go away. Get out of the room. That sort of thing."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he also thought Goldfinger had too much talking for a James Bond movie, so
Right.
whatever.
That's okay. So you found Stargate eventually at some point, right? So the movie's in the theaters in '94.
That's where I
And you
first
you started
encountered
you
it.
started writing about it, right? So you found it kind of professionally. You were doing interviews with, you said, with Brad and Rob after the show started ramping up in '97.
It was more no, they came in. It came in later, more like Universes when I really started speaking to
Yeah,
them. I saw the movie. And I walked out of the movie thinking, "Wow, that's almost a really good movie." Uh,
almost.
almost, it just felt for some reason fell a little short for me as being like a great movie. It was really good. It didn't blow me away as being a great. I can't remember now what it was about it that made me feel that way. But when they were doing a TV show of it, I was thrilled to check it out because like they felt, Brad and Robert and Jonathan Glasner all said it to me when I wrote the book. They thought the idea of the Stargate itself was brilliant, as like it was their version of the Enterprise,
Yeah, as a
being able to
storytelling
go from
device.
planet to planet. It was wonderful. Thank you. I couldn't think of the phrase. I'm tired. Um, but and so I was fascinated to watch the show, and it kind of sucked me in almost right away. I think the first couple episodes, the pilot was great. A couple of the first episodes were a little rougher, I thought, but then I started watching the show, and for a while I didn't stay with it the whole time, only because of life. But it was just so fascinating watching it, and I love an ensemble, and I love a good sci-fi show, and Stargate certainly answered those things.
Yeah. It's I mean, right, I do Stargate kind of for a living here. I've done this site
Mhm.
and the channel for a lot of years. I'm very positive. I love the movie, but I'm also fully aware of what it is. It's I wouldn't call it a B movie, but in part it was a product of its time, and I would walk out of the theater or walk out of a showing. I don't remember if I saw it in the theater, but I definitely own the
Mm.
VHS.
There you go.
Uh, but what I loved about it was that it was a brand new science fiction universe, going and being a huge fan of Star Trek and an almost as huge fan of Star Wars. Here was a brand new science fiction universe that was just ripe for new kinds of storytelling. And I love history, so I loved all the tie-ins to Egyptian mythology and all
Right.
that part, which the series obviously took in a lot of different really interesting directions. Um, But yeah, I can get the sense that the movies kind of, it felt like it was most of the way there. Uh,
Yeah.
the characters are drawn, right, rather two-dimensionally, ways that I think the show expanded on. Obviously, the
Oh,
show had
yeah,
more
big
than
time. Yeah.
2 hours to work with. Uh, but it's so interesting because Stargate went from that feature film premiere to a show where now this could all unspool, whereas something like Star Trek obviously started with 79 episodes and then went to feature film and had to learn how to adapt to storytelling on a different scale, different
Which it had a
timetable.
rough time doing. Yeah. It had a rough time doing in the beginning.
Yeah,
Star
what
Trek.
talk to me about the motion picture here. We can take a little Star Trek tangent.
Sure. No, I mean,
When that franchise decided to leap to the big screen, there were certain sensibilities in the late 1970s about science fiction spectacle film.
well, first of all, the studios didn't even know how to handle science fiction. I mean, that was the funny thing. It's like there was first of all, let me say this: the '70s was an incredible period for Star Trek. It's one of my favorite things to chronicle,
Yeah.
and that I have chronicled is the journey from canceled TV show through syndication, the animated series, the conventions, the growing groundswell of support for something new on Star Trek. Just watching that whole journey, you get Star Trek Phase 2, the series that almost happened, which became Star Trek the Motion Picture. There was Philip Kaufman was doing in '76 was doing Star Trek Planet of the Titans, which was a movie that Paramount was behind. It was going to be so weird and so different. And then Star Wars came out, and Paramount said, "Forget it." Well, before Star Wars came out, when Planet of the Titans was in active development, they canceled it and said there's no future in science fiction. And this was
Mm-hmm.
in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
In 1977, Star Wars comes out, and the Star Trek Phase 2 television series suddenly morphed after the success of Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind in '77. Paramount said, we got to make it a movie. Star Trek's got to be a movie. It's got to cash in on the Star Wars thing. But the problem was you had a battle of them wanting effects, which became a debacle for the film itself generally, and the toughness of trying to translate that TV show into a movie, like maintaining what worked about the movie, but then making it broad enough for a wider audience. And it didn't quite succeed in that. Wrath of Khan, the second movie in '82,
Yeah.
had a much better job, and it was a much smaller movie.
Yeah.
But Motion Pictures, I will say, it is the one true movie of those films in the sense of the scope of the film,
It
the
found scope
enterprise. I
for
mean, it
sure.
it did. I mean, and the themes. See, I always liked the idea of V'ger and the whole idea of like this machine seeking its creator and all that stuff. I thought was great until I read Harlan Ellison's review of it in Starlog, where he says this being that has acquired all the knowledge in the universe is too stupid to wipe the smudge off its nameplate to know that its name is Voyager and not V'ger. And I'm like, yeah, that's that's a little tough to rationalize.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
Well, yeah,
So
you don't get mad at your computer for not paying attention to the shape of its RAM.
there you go. Okay, good. You tell
Yeah,
Harlan that if
that's
you
funny.
could. That's
That's
fine.
funny.
But yeah, but look, and I remember the excitement. Oh my God. Like I'm sure like a lot of the Stargate guys out there, you and everybody are so excited about this new show happening and stuff. And I remember when Motion Picture was in production and any photo I would see, and it was that excitement building to the arrival of this thing you've been waiting for, you know? And you guys, I mean, Stargate's been off the air how many years now? It's gonna be like 14 years, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah, 15 years.
Right?
SGU went
Longer
off
than
the
we had
air
to wait for Star Trek.
this month in 2011. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
much
it's
longer than the Star Trek wait. I think
yeah.
we must be getting close to Battlestar Galactica's wait right now.
Yeah, it was a long wait.
That was about
That's a
20
long
years.
wait. Yeah, that was a great show. That show, the reboot. I mean, I really like that show as well. But anyways, that's taking a diversion there. But yeah, so Star Trek: The Motion Picture, though, it's like for what it is. I mean, for its time, it was pretty epic. But like I say, it had so many problems in it that people are calling it Star Trek: The Motionless Picture, and they
It is
they
a slow-paced
it's a
film at the
slow.
time, right?
It
And
is a really slow
I
movie.
mean, you compare it to something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you kind of get the sensibility, but not as esoteric.
I'm
Um,
one of the heathens who thinks that's 2001 is a slow movie too, though. I don't. I don't enjoy that movie as much as a lot of people
It
do. It's like
certainly
I'm
is
sitting there
slow.
going, "Come on, move, move. Let's get things going here. Come on."
Yeah, but you watched Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and
And
it's
I
like
said, "Move, move. Let's move. Let's
their
get things
version of
going here."
doing scale. Like, let's take this modestly budgeted NBC TV series that was now in syndication. Everybody in the universe was familiar with it. Let's put it on the big screen and charge movie ticket prices for it. You got
Right,
to do scale, and their version of scale was, well, everything kind of moves really slowly. You get a sense of how big everything is, right? The
right.
Enterprise and V'ger and moving through these
But that
spaces
sucks the energy
because
out of
it's
the
moving
movie.
really
That's the
slowly and
problem.
the shots
Right.
are lingering and we're taking a really long time and we're looking at each other about what we're experiencing. And then Spock goes outside and finally something happens. That's how you
Yes.
do scale, I guess, in
I
that
suppose,
film
but it,
strategy.
boy,
So
did it zap the energy out of that. Yeah.
Wrath of Khan is again, maybe because of how old I was when I saw it, but Wrath of Khan I'll still say is my favorite film of all time.
Wrath of Khan is an amazing movie, and being a Star Trek fan after the motion picture, and then we got this other movie that did everything that the first movie didn't in terms of focusing on those characters, of having the little asides between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that were such a hallmark of the original series. They just nailed it. Nicholas Meyer did a fantastic job as director of it. And when the Reliant, there's the bit where Khan's got control of the Reliant, and it cuts into the side of the Enterprise, just blasting a phaser line down the side of it. You feel it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing. It makes you feel for the Enterprise as it's happening. Like, oh my God, what are they doing? And then of course the death of Spock. And sorry to spoil that for people, uh, but it was just a very different movie, but a very satisfying movie in so many ways. And I think it's why it's still the one that when they're making new movies, they always say, "Is this like Wrath of Khan? Are we capturing
yep.
Wrath of Khan?"
Finally
They try
figuring out
to,
what they got right.
yeah, exactly. So no, it's great stuff. I mean, the movies go up and down from there after that, but but I don't want to drag people through a history of Star Trek movies. But there's,
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but as much as people, rag on Bill Shatner for his acting in the '60s, I mean, watch Wrath of Khan, watch 2, 3, and 4. That's
yeah,
his performance is deep and wonderful and emotional.
it really is. It's like two especially gives him the opportunity to do things we've never seen before. I mean, not even that so, oh my God, he did this incredible thing, but he's just so good in those moments where, Carol Marcus asks him, "How do you feel?" He goes, "How do I feel? I feel old. You show me a son, wants to kill me the same as this other guy does." I mean, it's just really good stuff. And
Yeah,
his eulogy at Spock's death, his soul was the most human. I mean,
yeah.
it's great. It's great. People are gonna like, Ed, get off the Star Trek thing. But
No, this is
uh
honestly this is one of the reasons I had here.
oh,
We'll
okay,
talk about
then
the
good.
Stargate book. Yeah, well, let's come back to Star Trek because you get this project. You've done a bunch of oral histories, and let's kind of show people some of your work. This is
Sure.
Chevrons Locked, the unofficial, unauthorized oral history of Stargate SG-1. I want to ask you in a minute about why it's unauthorized because it started authorized.
Because it's not, well, yeah, it's true, it did.
This was the the Stargate history of the Stargate production that came out in 2023. This time 3 years ago. Your other work, here it is on Amazon. Uh, your
Oh my
other
God.
work here on Amazon, right? So this two-parter, the 50-year mission, is
Yeah.
chronicling the history of Star Trek. You've also done Star Wars, fantasy sitcoms of the 60s. Oh, I need to read this book. Just what we're talking about. Beauty and the Beast, Voices from Krypton. A lot of these you've co-authored with Mark A. Altman, is that right?
That is true.
Or was it
That
just the
is true.
Star Trek
No,
volumes?
most of the oral histories, I'm looking at the covers myself right now. Most of the books have been with Mark. I did Voices from Krypton, my Superman one by myself, and Chevrons Locked by myself. Those were the first two oral histories I did on my own. Um, yeah, it's just looking at my life pass before my eyes. Uh, you know, it's
So are these all or
my
mostly
war,
in
my
the
one work of
genre?
fiction, Fleischer and the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. My one work of fiction. God, I'm sorry.
Oh, beautiful. Uh, and then James Bond, Battlestar Galactica, so say we all. Uh,
Now you're getting into the cheesy publisher stuff,
oh,
though.
here we go. Look,
Here
we're
we
getting
go.
into the deep cuts, the Dark
Well,
Shadows tribute.
yeah,
Uh,
the Rocky Books official. That was good. But
did these more or less fall into this subgenre of oral history? And would you tell us what an oral history is?
Sure. I'd say about a dozen of these books fall into oral history. I think it's a dozen. An oral history, it's like when you do a regular narrative book, the way I look at it, it is the history of what was, right? It tells the story of how something was made, what went into the making of it, and all that. The oral history is the perception of the people involved, how it was made. I mean, so you can have different opinions and different views or different memories of the different projects. But the idea is to when you're presenting the information, you're listing the person's name, then a quote, and then another person's name and a quote, and another person's name and a quote, and you're telling the story in a linear fashion or however whatever fashion you're telling it, but you have to intercut those quotes so that they support each other and they're feeding on each other, feeding
Hmm.
each other, so that you're growing the story of what you're telling. There have been people who have reviewed some of these books and dismissed it as this is just a bunch of random quotes thrown together, which aggravates me beyond belief
I bet.
because it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I am not very organized in my life, but when it comes to oral histories, I'm an idiot savant. It's the one thing I discovered that I can do where I can spread out a whole bunch of transcripts and just be able to say, okay, this quote goes here, this one goes here, this one goes here. Oh, wait a second, this quote should actually go here. And you're constantly shifting them around to tell the story. And imagine doing that for 50 years of Star Trek.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of history. It's
A
a lot
lot of
of
material to work
voices.
with.
It's a lot of material to work with, which is great. Um, and so that's the idea of the oral history, though, and how you do it. And the beauty of most of these things is if you get the cooperation of the people who made the shows or the movies, whatever it may be, it's a gift because usually they take the attitude that they're going to spend as much time as necessary to tell the story until it's done. And that means multiple sessions. I mean, when I did the Battlestar Galactica book, first of all, it's called So Say We All. Ron Moore sent out an email to every cast and crew member asking that if they were open to it to cooperate with me, to talk
Wow.
to me about it. And everybody said yes. I mean,
Wow.
everybody. And Ron spent a total of, I believe it was 14 or 15 hours on the phone with me talking about Battlestar Galactica.
It was obviously
I
important
mean,
to him that this story is told and is told right.
and that's the thing. It's important. What I've discovered is it's important to everybody who, same thing with Chevrons Locked. I mean, anyone I spoke to for that book, they didn't say, look, I got 20 minutes, do your talk and let's go. They just would do as many sessions as necessary. I'd have follow-up questions. Ooh, I need a quote about this. Could you possibly give me one? Because I need something to bridge. Something's missing. I need something like this. And if you have a good enough rapport with people, you can go back to them like that and say, and you don't feel like you're majorly inconveniencing them. You're saying, I need something. I just need a quote. Can you give me something about this statement or this subject that I don't have enough on, or something like that
Yeah, they're helping
to
you
uh,
tell
to be
that
able to tell.
story.
They are, but they're all invested. I have not. I did the Voices from Krypton Superman book, which I know we're going to talk about Superman, but I interviewed, I think it was 250 people for that. And it was the same thing. Nobody comes into there with the attitude of this sucked. I can't believe I did this show and I have to talk about it now. They were all so enthusiastic. And all that does is fuel me because this is like I'm telling this story that they want told. And because they want it told, they'll give me anything I want. And I mean that in a good way, not in a haha manipulating them. No, they want to tell the story. And it's wonderful. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is. I love doing these oral histories. I really do.
Yeah. There's right. The creatives place a certain amount of trust in you. I imagine you have to earn their trust initially, asking good questions, showing that
Hopefully, yeah.
you're being careful with their work. You want to present their work well and accurately. Uh, but
But
then
you also build
you
up a
get into it.
rapport. You build up a rapport with them. Like Ron Moore, I've known since the 80s from Star Trek.
Yeah.
So, he and I spoke periodically, and it's the same thing with most of these things. Star Trek I've been covering for, since the 80s. So you build a rapport with a lot of these people. So you can go back to them and say, hey, I'm doing this book. You want to, will you talk to me for it? And most of them say yes. I haven't had anybody turn me down. So anyway, you're going to say something else. I just wanted to point that out, that it's built over years, that relationship with these people
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah. I appreciate
So
that. And it's I commend the book and the other oral history projects to viewers because it really is a craft, right? It's something that I think we develop these skills when we do journalism, when we're writing about shows and getting to know folks in productions and sort of understanding the context of a lot of their stories. But you come out of this with hours and hours and hours of interview footage, audio, transcripts. I
Yeah.
can't imagine how much sort of raw material you have to work with after talking to 250 different people, many for multiple occasions, and now you have to go through it and tell a story. And you are, you're not just putting the quotes in the right order. This is the craft of figuring out what to say when and how to stitch them all together, and then recognizing, like you said, this piece of the story, I don't quite have the right thing from the right person. I got to go and fill it in.
Right. Right. It is a constant process. I mean, almost every one of these books, somebody had to pry them out of my dead hand, so to speak, for me to hand it over because I am working and work. I remember, so say we all was it was Thanksgiving weekend of that year. I think it was 2016, I want to say. That I mean, I came back from Thanksgiving and I spent the rest of the weekend just sitting there in front of the computer working on this book and working on it, working on it, and telling the story and getting it right and finessing it. And finally, by Monday, it had to be handed in. There was no choice. It had to go to the publisher on that Monday. And that's how a lot of these books are. It's just
Yeah.
like my Nacelle Books, who did Voices from Krypton, almost had a heart attack when they realized the book was over 300,000 words. Uh, that, but Star Trek 50-year mission, it was supposed to be one book telling the whole story. And Mark and I went to the publisher and we said, look, I said, we'd like to split this into two books. And at first they said no. And we said, we won't even charge you for the second book. We said, you give us the royalties from the second book, apply them to the first book, anything you sell on the second book. And we'll do that because we want the story told. And mind you, of all the
And
oral
do it
histories
right.
we do, that was the most successful. I mean, you get royalty checks from it still 10 years later, which is amazing.
Mm.
And that's not bragging. That's just like shock almost, right? So, but the decision to split it into two books was the right one to make because
Yeah.
you want to tell the story properly. So they were another publisher almost had a heart attack. And then when they took a look at the manuscript, forget the royalty thing, because once they took a look at the manuscript and they saw what was in it and realized we had so much more still to tell, yeah, make it two books. Let's just do that. And that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. It
Yeah.
becomes unwieldy, but
The
it's
material needs to be as long as it
yeah,
needs to be. Is what I tell my students. How long should my paper be? It should be exactly as long as it needs to be. It should
that's
not feel
right.
like it's longer than it ought to have been. But if it's 300,000 words, if that's what the story is, that's what the story is.
Well, it was. And I guess Star Trek between the two books was probably 500,000 words between the two of them
Wow.
telling that story. So, yeah, it's, but I love it. And it's, it's the idea of doing a job well, right? And that's hopefully I did the job well. And
Yeah.
Mark and I did the job well. We'll see. I mean,
You
what people
remind me
say.
of sitting there pounding away at your keyboard over Thanksgiving weekend reminds me of the adage that, good books are never finished, only abandoned. They
Yeah,
have to, they have
that's a
to,
very true
the
phrase.
publisher has to yank it out of your hands at some point so that you stop working on it.
Yep. Yep. It's absolutely true. Because I definitely have the habit of continuing to want to do it or finishing it. And people say, oh, you never want to do that again, do you? Deal with that subject. They're like, are you kidding? Bring it on. I'm ready for the next one. So,
Yeah, second edition.
yep.
Ocean Stars in the chat says you both have such amazing jobs. I'm thinking of going back to college to do film studies or study filmmaking. That's great. Being
Yeah.
able to cover the history of a production and an active production is kind of a special gift. I'm also I get to do a lot of it for Stargate, but I'm envious of what you get to do. What are you
Well, I've
doing
been
right
able to
now
go
for Women's World?
I focus mostly on classic TV. It's funny. I was with when I was said I mentioned I was with Bauer Publishing. I was with them for a total of 20 years. Print division for 15, then for 5, I went online because they shut down the magazines I was working on. And for closerweekly.com, I was covering classic TV. Then COVID hit, and I was let go in 2020 with a lot of other people. Unfortunately, after 20 years, that was heartbreaking because I didn't know what I was going to do that Monday morning, getting up. Um, but then a couple of years later, Women's World asked me. They reposted one of my old stories I had done for them as well when I was at Closer, and it did well. So they asked me if I wanted to do some freelance, and I did. And then suddenly the freelance became a job, and now I'm the senior entertainment editor. Yeah, these are my most recent stories, and it's all over the place, not just classic TV. We've had very good success with Star Trek of all things,
Mm-hmm.
and Stargate. Not recently on Stargate, but on Star Trek, Doctor Who a little bit. People are shocked. Why are you writing about that for Women's World? Because people are reading it. I don't know what do
Because
you want
people are
from me.
reading it. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. The content's
yeah,
doing well.
and
You
it's
did
yeah,
several Stargate pieces in a row that,
yeah.
that were really well put together that I'm sure people saw come across their feed and didn't realize necessarily that you were the author of it.
Well, I was taking excerpts from the book too. That helped. I mean, having the book right there allowed me to do excerpts that, but very focused, like micro versions of the book, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of stuff. So I do that on a daily basis. So I'm like I say, I'm their senior entertainment editor, and right now primarily focused on classic TV. But as you can see from that breakdown, it also gets out there into different things. Westerns is something else I've been playing with a lot lately. And it's again, that's a genre I'm sort of discovering now,
Okay.
much more than I ever did in my life. I mean, I liked Westerns, but not that much. Now it's like, oh, you want me to write about a Western? I'm going to dive into it now. I'm going to be a Western fan. Just like I
Is there
became a Doctor
renewed
Who fan.
interest in Western content around,
Well,
the big
Yellowstone.
shows now, like Yellowstone,
Yeah, the
sort of
Taylor Sheridan
reviving that
stuff.
genre?
Absolutely. I was talking to a gentleman named Rob Word, who has a YouTube channel called The Word on Westerns. And Rob has been doing this for decades, and he covers the Western. He does seminars and film presentations, panels, and interviews people about the Western. Kind of what you guys are doing with Stargate, he does for the Westerns. And so, speaking to him do that, it's like that ignited sort of interviewing him for some of my articles ignited my passion for this. And he explained to me that the Taylor Sheridan thing has changed things,
Mm.
whereas his audience used to be 65 and over. Since Yellowstone, it's now 45 and over. That's a huge drop in the demographic, in
Wow.
a good way.
In
I
a good
mean,
way, yeah.
yeah. So he's gained 20 years worth of viewers because of Yellowstone. So it's really has reignited the Western in a lot of ways.
It's amazing. I guess everything comes back around again.
It does. Everything's a cycle.
Lockwatcher in chat says, loved the Chevrons Locked book. Such a great resource. I read the book on a cruise ship in Alaska.
Wow. Thank you.
There you go.
Hope you ate a lot of food while you're on the cruise ship. Uh, but no, thank you. That's great. Happy to hear it. I hope people read it. See, I have no idea how it did, so how many people read it.
Lockwatcher also wants to know any chance there will be a similar book to Chevrons Locked for Atlantis or Stargate Universe. So let's talk a little bit about the history of this particular project, how it
Sure.
came to you, because I remember there was a sort of an intention of doing a second volume for the spin-offs if this one did well, and then things kind of went sideways. Can you share a little bit about the story
Sure.
of the origins of Chevrons Locked and how it evolved and
Yeah,
ended up at Nacelle
absolutely.
Books? Nacelle
Well, yeah,
Nacelle Books.
eight Nacelle books, right? I did it originally for Eagle Moss, and Eagle Moss, of course, was doing all the miniature models and of ships and things and different books. So I'd been hired by them to do it, and it was going to be the official Stargate book. I interviewed everybody for it, and was writing the book basically. And then Eagle Moss went under, and the book was back in my hands. So Nacelle, which had done documentaries and was breaking into the toy market and was interested in getting into publishing, was looking, like I say, getting into publishing. So I had the idea of Stargate taking the book to them. First thing I did was contact Brad, though, Brad Wright, because I didn't want him to have done the interview for the official book and then turn around and the book shows up, the interview shows up and the book is from an unofficial
Yeah.
source.
Because
But
it
Brad
was
was okay with it.
licensed originally, right? When it was
Right.
with
That's what
Eagle
I mean by
Moss,
author.
it was going to be
That's
officially licensed, which means MGM's lawyers were going to have a chance to sign off on every page.
Oh yeah, and that
That's
was
not how it ended
its
up.
own. No, and in a way, that way it's good because the truth is they were going to be tough because they wanted to know. Like there were some interviews that came from conventions, like Richard Dean Anderson, some convention appearances and things like that. They wanted to not only be documented, but then he would have to sign off on it. I mean,
Yeah.
they were already putting Neil Moss through the ringer in
Yeah.
terms of what they wanted for an
I'll
official
say
book.
working with licensees over the years, MGM was pretty notorious about
Yeah,
being kind of a hard fence to get over.
yeah, absolutely. So in NASA, we didn't have that. Now, what you lose in going from official to unofficial or unauthorized is the photos. You can't really use the
Oh
photos. Now, I
yeah.
could probably gotten a few in there. I mean, because then you could say it's fair use. But
Sure.
NASA was also very worried. They did not want a lawsuit or anything with MGM, and I get it. So we really, and that's why the cover's a caricature on the cover.
That's why the
rather
cover's
than a
caricature.
that's why.
Yeah.
And any of the books I was doing for them had caricatures for covers because, again, that's fair use. You can do a parody, you can do a caricature because it's not a still from the show. But that's the reason that it's unauthorized and why there are no photos in the book, which is if the book has a major downside, I think that's it, that there aren't photos. So yeah, so that's the origin of it. And then Nacelle unfortunately didn't stay with publishing. I think they had too many things going on, and I think they let publishing be the thing that slid.
Okay.
And so I don't know if there will be a follow-up book. I'd love to. I frankly would love to do one on Universe because it's gotten such little love, but I'm also warned that because it's gotten so little love, nobody would buy it. So I
Well,
don't know
there are
if that's
definitely
the case or
fans.
not.
Yeah, there are
Yeah,
SGU fans who would buy it and love it and treasure it for sure, like
yeah.
me. But SGU is always right. I kind of end up in this conversation with a lot of the licensees who wisely start with SG1 and kind of gauge sales because SG1 has the more episodes,
Yeah.
longer term, generally bigger audience,
And I think it's what
and so
comes to mind when you think of Stargate.
those merchandise items usually sell better.
Yeah. And I do think if you say the word Stargate, I don't know about a lot of other people, but in my mind, the first thing that pops into my mind is SG1
Yeah.
just by hearing the word Stargate. When they said they're doing a new one, the first thing I thought of was they could bring everybody back. I didn't think of Atlantis or Universe. I thought from SG1, are they going to bring people back? I mean, so that's not an insult to any of the other shows. I'm just saying that's the one that made the greatest imprint on me, and I think on a lot of people was SG1.
Yeah, but Atlantis and Universe, those of course are histories that deserve to be told. I would love
Yeah,
to see some sort of a follow-up book in an oral history format that
I would like to
explored
do it.
those shows and then also the gap, right? This is we're entering into a new season of Stargate fandom with a new show coming back here in the next year or two where hopefully there's going to be that renewed interest, right? Something like
Right.
Yellowstone did for the Western genre. Hopefully Stargate kind of comes back toward the center of the cultural zeitgeist. Uh, and that history is really interesting to me. This is a lot of what we've been covering on Gate World, obviously, is the history of no Stargate. That
Right.
gap of time and what happens to the franchise and its fan base, etc., as we've crossed these 15 years with no new productions other than the web series.
But it is that thing I said before about Star Trek in the 70s. That period is fascinating, right? How do the fans keep something alive
Yeah.
when there's nothing to keep alive, so to speak? You know what I mean? Because you're not getting new episodes or anything.
And it
I
ends
mean, you
up
got
being very
the
fruitful, right? You can't tell the story of Star
yeah.
Trek without the story of the
Oh,
syndication market.
I interviewed the guy who had the idea for putting the Star Trek on at the local news hour at like against the local news. I mean, he got the rights to the show and started showing it in some local network, local outlets, regions, and it started beating the news. It was doing great, and that started. Then other stations said, "Hey, we ought to do that too," and they got it, and that started the whole thing. And it really is an incredible bit of history which is why I spent, when we were writing 50-Year Mission, so much time doing it. And I think the new Stargate would have that same journey in its own way of what's happened in all these years. I think it's fascinating.
Raj Luther wants to know, Ed, what stories did you enjoy and not enjoy from the Stargate series and movies? Is there anything that you would have changed? Let's put a spin on this. Let's say the Stargate that you've watched, any stories that have resonated with you, but also chronicling the production and hearing all these behind the scenes production stories. Where, at what point does a story hit you and say, okay, this is clearly something that is important enough that needs to be explored. I got to get multiple people talking about this topic. I need to devote a few pages to it.
I think the mythology, really, the different races, all of that stuff to me was the most fascinating part of watching how the show that started as sort of a sci-fi adventure of the week, like, oh, we're going to a new world, we're going to a new place, and all that, suddenly starts digging deeper into its own mythology
Mm-hmm.
and with the ancients and with all of them. I mean, it was just, to me, that was the most fascinating, sitting down and talking to everybody about how that evolved from where it started to how it evolved and what it became. It became this really incredible tapestry of alien culture and a universe being built in front of our eyes, rather than just going, like I say, from one world to another world, just a new adventure every week. It just tied together to create this story. And that, to me, chronicling that was the most exciting part. I think the rest was great, talking about how everybody got cast and the changes when people left, when Michael Shanks left, when he came back, Ben Browder joining the show. I mean, all that stuff is fascinating to me.
Hmm.
And I love telling it, especially I'm also very fascinated by what does a show do when it loses some of its major components, like MASH did, like Cheers did, and Stargate did. And yet somehow the show comes back, not stronger, I wouldn't say in the case of Stargate, but in those other shows, I'd say when you had, you know, Wayne Rogers leave MASH and then Mike Farrell came in. Well, my God, that changed that show in such a great way. In my
Yeah.
mind, when Shelley Long left Cheers and Kirstie Alley came in,
Yeah.
that just revitalized Cheers in a massive way to me personally, you know. And having Ben come in when he did, it just changed the show, gave the show a new energy in a sense. I thought. I mean, it was a different, you know. I mean, it's the same kind of show, but he brought a different kind of energy to it than was there. So I was fascinated by all of that stuff. But if I had to pick something, again, I would say it's that look at the growing mythology and tracking it and how it changed and how it evolved as the show went on.
That's what I loved about Stargate. That's one of the main reasons I started Gateworld, was tracking the mythology. You
Right,
know, there's an episode that makes a reference to something from 2 seasons ago, and if you're a fan and you're paying attention, you're going to catch it. Um,
right.
yeah, it's fun to just sew together all those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was it. And I did have that regret about not being able to do the same thing for Atlantis and Universe because it would have been that discovery process for me. Because Stargate SG-1, you're doing Chevrons Locked, was a discovery process. Even though I watched the show, talking to everybody and digging deeper in a way that I hadn't on this show before was a wonderful process for me because it just opens my mind to like, oh God, I missed this the first time
Yeah.
around. A lot of this, I gotta play catch up now, and I have to check it out. And I love it. I mean, that discovery is a wonderful thing doing these kinds of books for
And
me.
the way that these behind the scenes stories end up informing the production, or vice versa, informing the story on screen. You know, you mentioned Ben Browder coming on the show in season 9. I was reading in Chevrons Locked this morning Ben's story about how when he got the job, he went and watched all 8 seasons of Stargate SG-1, and people were
Right,
saying, you know, nobody does this. You know, watch a couple, three of our best ones, get a sense of it. No, he wanted to understand the mythology, who his character was coming in, what Cameron Mitchell's place was in this universe, and they eventually sewed that into the show, right? So there's references to Mitchell having read all of SG-1's mission reports on the
right.
show. Those little moments like that are just, when they happen, they're magical.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and he was that was the thing when talking to him about that. He was you could sense it. You could just feel the dedication he had to the show, to the character, to becoming a part of an existing unit. It was so important to him to not just feel like, oh, I'm the new guy on the set. You know, it's like, no, he wanted to feel connected to that universe, and he did. So
What
it was
were
great.
Yeah, other than Ben, what were some of your favorite conversations? I mean, it's a lot of work,
Oh boy.
obviously, to sit and have these conversations, figure out the right things to ask, document them,
Yeah.
process the transcripts afterwards. It's a lot of work. But looking back on the process of your work in Stargate, what are the people and the conversations that stand out in your head?
The biggest one, I mean, it sounds like I'm just butt kissing, but I'm not. Brad Wright was so incredible to me. We started off, it was very funny. It was only supposed to be a session, maybe two. And he
Mhm.
writes about this in the forward in the book. We were talking every week, trying to continue the story, to tell everything that had to be told. Again, willing to take as much time as necessary. And I think he was my favorite because learning what I learned from him, I was able to then go out and reach out to other people and speak to those people about just the show. And I wish I could say to you, oh, it's specifically this that appealed to me, but it's really just the notion of letting me into the process, so to
Mm.
speak. You know, even though we're looking back at the process, but allowing me to come in and really learn the highs and the lows of what he went through with it and what other people did too. It was just so there aren't specifics I can point to beyond the fact of people sharing their time, their memory, and their lives with me during the making of this show. And not all of them were like every instance was a happy instance for them. There were highs and lows for people, but it was just opening up and sharing. That's really what sticks out in my mind. And that may sound very vague, and I hope it's not, but that's really what I came away with
Yeah,
in
I
talking to
understand.
them. It's just incredible. I feel that way a lot with these books, though. And like you could say to me about any of these, ask me about this. Oh, well, Star Trek, I'm a little more specific with things, but ask me about a lot of these books, and it would be the same answer. It's more about just letting me in on the process and allowing me to tell the story, their story of what went into the making of this. And not just one person for like a magazine interview, but for a book in which I'm interweaving all of their stories to tell a story about what went into the making of the show. That's what stands out.
Brad is also, I feel like he's pretty easy to talk to because he's one of us, right?
Yeah.
You guys are cut from the same cloth. You're, I think, of the same generation. He's a huge Star Trek fan.
Yep.
We can just sit and talk Star Trek all day.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, we're hanging out here and talking Stargate with Ed Gross, the author of Chevrons Locked. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. If you have any questions for Ed, why don't you drop them in the chat and tag me at gateworld.net so that I can see your questions. Uh, oh, okay, so we talked about Stargate, right? What Chevrons Locked and 50-year mission is obviously one of your most high-profile projects with Mark
Yeah.
Altman. Uh, other than Chevrons Locked, which we know is very special because we're Stargate fans.
That's right.
Do you have a favorite work, a project that you've put out that is maybe didn't do as well or is not quite as high profile as 50-year mission, but that you just loved working on?
I mean, I have to be honest with you. I really love working on all these books. That's the thing. It's like there's not one. I mean, I could tell you 50-year mission is a real standout to me, but just as much, if I don't know if I can jump to it or not, but Voices from Krypton, the Superman oral history
Yeah,
book that
let's
I
do it. Let's
did.
talk Superman.
I have to tell you, I'm in a very rare position in the sense of I did the what I many people have called, and I will certainly call the definitive unofficial history of Superman with Voices from Krypton. Because I did that book, I was invited to co-write the definitive. The book was called Superman: The Definitive History, but so it was the official history. So I don't know too many writers who have had the opportunity to write sort of a definitive unofficial history
Definitive
and then a
unofficial.
definitive history. It's pretty amazing. And these were the books, or this one especially, Voices from Krypton, was one I had said to myself when I was writing with Mark on those other books. And Mark's a Superman fan, but not nearly as big a Superman fan as I am. And I just knew that I was, even if I have to self-publish this thing, I was going to do an oral history of Superman. I just had to. Um, and the fact that I got to do it, and I went down to my basement. Mark calls it the TARDIS. It's not. It's a box of cassette tapes thrown into like many boxes of cassette tapes from over the years. And I pull up and pull out the interviews to start the foundation of what I've done for people who are no longer with us and things, and just digging in to see what I've got, and then doing all the additional interviews. And that had like a total of 250 people in it, and it was sort of my crowning achievement. I mean, and then getting the chance to do Superman: The Definitive History was mind blowing because, again, you don't get the chance to do unofficial and official books on a subject. And I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to write anything else. I'm certainly writing other things, but that was sort of like the top of the mountain as far as I was concerned. And now everything else is just gravy. I mean, because I achieved what I wanted to achieve with that. And it was exciting. It really
Oh
was.
yeah.
I'm like, I was speaking to all these people. I've spoken to like, it's got to be 5 or 6 of the Supermen, between on screen and voice actors. And it was more than that, then, if I count the voice actors. So I'm like a kid in a candy store. And
Hmm.
it's such a cliche, but it's true. It's like I get giddy about doing this stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I'm speaking as I'm going to be at a convention next week doing Superman related interviews. So I'm going to be sitting with Brandon Routh and Tyler Hecklin and George Newbern and a few others. And I can't wait. It's like this is never just a job to me. This is much more. It's so exciting. You're all choked up, I can tell. But yeah, I know. Just teasing. But yeah, so
That's amazing.
that was definitely my crowning achievement, I think.
And you're telling her it's got to be a different project because when you're telling the story of Star Trek, it's the same universe.
Yeah.
Superman, right? It's different takes on the character over and over in different media.
Well, Superman's got the distinction of, he was created in 1938. It's when Action Comics #1 came out. The radio show debuted. I don't know what your choke. The radio show came out in 1940. And what's incredible about that character's history is that since then, there has not been one decade where Superman has not been in some form of production. He's just it's always been there, whether it's cartoons or movies or TV or Broadway musical, whatever it may be. It's just astounding, and it continues to this day. So it's yeah, it's pretty incredible history. And but Star Trek, yeah, you're in a situation where it's sort of the same universe, just years away from each other. This thing, you're rebooting it every time. You're rebooting it, whether it's George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, Lois and Clark, Smallville, whatever it may be. You're rebooting. It's all beginning over again, and yet the audience stays with it and it goes forward. I mean, character's going to be 90 in 28. That's astounding. So,
You
yeah.
have a favorite iteration of Superman?
Yeah, I mean, and anyone who's ever heard me speak on the subject will know this has become my cliche, my go-to, but it's true. Christopher Reeve is my favorite. I mean, Christopher Reeve just nails it. He's just looks it, and he just brings incredible warmth to the role, I think. That being said, I have the philosophy of I follow the yes. So it's whoever's wearing the yes, Ed's there. You know, it's uh, it's like James Bond. Whoever plays James Bond, I'm there. But with Superman, it is. It's like, oh, they came out with the Legion of Super Pets or something as a big screen animated movie a couple of years ago, right? They played the John Williams theme and they had Superman in it, and it had the S in it. I'm going to go see it. It was a movie just about crypto. I'd go see it. It doesn't matter. When I was a kid, my comic book collection consisted of any Superman title, and there were like 8 of them coming out monthly at the time, between Action and Superman and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, the Justice League, and all these things. And the only Marvel I collected was Spider-Man. It's the only Marvel I cared about when I was a kid was Spidey. I love Spider-Man. So ever since then, though, it's like, oh, they're doing a new TV show. I'm watching it. They're doing a new movie. I get psyched. I get excited. And and like the James Gunn movie came out last summer. I couldn't wait for it to come out, especially when I heard he was using the John Williams theme in the trailer. It made me so happy because I feel like it's the James Bond theme. It should be used anytime Superman's there. That should be the theme, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth.
Now let me apologize for putting everything in the context of my own experience of Superman, but
No,
my love of the character was right. Christopher Reeve films growing up, and and then rediscovering Superman. I watched a little bit of Lois and Clark in college, that sort of thing. Right, the character is just sort of always around. There's always some version.
right.
But then the animated series, the anime, particularly, I came into animated DC through Justice League,
Okay.
and then from Justice League, kind of went back to Batman and Superman animated series. Um, I mean, my impression of the character, please correct me or tell me I'm a crazy person, is
Not
that,
going to tell you that. Go ahead.
or maybe this is the most obvious thing to say about the character over the last 25 years. Superman's had a lot of starts and stops, right? A lot of maybe false starts. Um,
Sure.
Projects that didn't do as well, or Warner Brothers wasn't as happy with, or the sequel issue recastings, going a different direction. Zack Snyder giving a very different tone to his take
Oh,
on the character
absolutely.
and the DC universe, and then with James Gunn deciding to sort of scrap all that and start over. Maybe in the 2020s we need more hope, we need more optimism, we need less darkness. What's your take on that sort of evolution of Superman, particularly on film, and the different actors who have played him on film and television over the course of the last, couple decades or so? What has Warner done well, and what does Warner need to do you think? What does James Gunn need to do to kind of get this character right in this
Well, I think
iteration so that we can get more than
yeah.
one or two films?
Well, I think he's got off to a good start, but I think what's happened over, we'll get to the latest movie in a sec. But I look at it like the Zack Snyder thing. Like when Zack Snyder got hired to direct it, I was very excited because I loved Watchmen. I thought Watchmen was a brilliant movie, and it's still one of my favorite superhero movies.
Yeah.
So I was very psyched that he was doing it. And then when Henry Cavill was hired, I had seen him on set in a movie he was doing called Immortals, and he sat in a trailer in front of us, and he was buffed up. His hair was black and it's curly. He had armor on, and he's answering questions. And this is before he got announced. I'm just sitting there staring, thinking to myself, "Oh my God, it's Superman!" I'm looking at Superman, looking at Henry Cavill.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, that's a little side note. But the Zack Snyder tried to do the idea of what would happen if Superman came into the real world, and it was dark, and his Superman was angsty. He was as dark as Batman in some instances. I mean, which I thought was a mistake. And that's where I think that the problem with the character when they treat him too darkly. I don't think Superman's a dark character. I think, the cliche is that he's about hope, but I really do think he is the bright center of the darkness. They can be as dark as you want around him, but he is the hope. He is the center that gives us hope. So I think there was some mistakes made with that. I do look at the three movies, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and the Snyder cut of the Justice League, which I think is a brilliant movie, as a chapter, just one chapter of
Mhm.
Superman, and then we moved on from it. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, it's done. We're moving on. I think what James Gunn has done is, whereas I said that Snyder brought Superman into the real world, I think what he's done with the new Superman is bring us into a comic book. That's what it
Mhm.
feels like to me, is that I feel like you get dropped into this thing in
Sure.
the right in the middle of things. Superman's got his butt kicked. He landed in the ice. Crypto shows up, drags him back to the fortress, and all this stuff. And there's so much about that. Oh, he's in a pocket universe. There's no explanation of what a pocket universe is. It just is. It's a pocket universe, right? Like if you picked up a comic book, you'd read and be a pocket universe. Okay, whatever. That's how that movie felt to me. And it was wonderful. And yes, Superman gets his butt kicked a bit in there, but at the end, when he gets the upper hand, has Crypto smash all of Lex Luthor's cameras that are instructing his should I say it? I mean, it's not. This movie's been out for a year. I guess I can spoil,
I
right?
finally watched it
Uh,
last week, so yeah, you can spoil me.
okay, well, so hopefully I'm not spoiling anything else. When you find out that it's his clone he's fighting, but Luthor is using these cameras to mark his every move and track how Superman fights to be able to combat anything he does. Crypto eats the cameras basically, and there's that triumphant bit where he is able to truly be Superman, and it's great. And you just feel the main thing I feel about the James Gunn Superman is you walk out of the theater feeling good.
Mm.
It may not have been
Yeah.
a perfect movie. I'm not saying it was the greatest Superman adventure ever made, but I'm saying is you feel good walking out of the movie. And for the way
Which is
things
true to the
have been,
character.
oh, totally. That's the whole
Yeah.
point of him. What he's become over the decades is evolved into this, again, that figure of hope, right? That thing was supposed to make you feel that you can get through the day. I mean, the story I tell all the time, and again, apologies if everyone's heard this, but I usually wear Superman shirts. I dressed up today, just wore a black shirt. Um, I usually wear Superman shirts. And after a snowstorm, my son and I were driving down the street, and I had one on, just happened to have one on. And there was an old guy with a walker, and he had a walker in one hand and a shovel in the other. And he would be moving his walker, then shovel, walker, shovel, walker, shovel. So I said to my son, we're gonna help him. And he goes, why? He's a kid at the time. So he's like, why? Because it's the right thing to do. So we get out, and the man did not want us to do it, right? He did not want us to. He said, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Sir, please, I'd feel so much better if you'd let my son and I help you. So he says, okay, if you don't mind. Then we pick up the shovels and we're shoveling, and he's leaning on his walker. And he says, thanks so much, fellas. My neighbor is sick, so I came over to help him. The guy with the walker is helping his sick neighbor,
Wasn't even his
shoveling his driving.
sidewalk.
And I just got back in the car and I pointed to the S, and not that I'm Superman, but I pointed to the S and I said, you do what you can to help others when you can.
Stands for something.
It stands for something. It means something. And that's really, I think, the power of Superman is that it means something. And I totally lost track of the question you had
That's
asked me.
beautiful. Again, coming back into the character as a young adult through the animated Justice League series
Yeah,
was gave me that sort of vibe of this character is different than the other people on the team, right? He's teased by Bruce Wayne for being a Boy Scout,
right.
because he's got that that hopeful optimism that we do this because it's the right thing to do, sort of a take. every point of entry into the story. His response to every story is going to be different than
Right.
Flash or Batman or whoever.
Well, think about the last episode of the follow-up to Justice League Unlimited. The very last episode, he's fighting Darkseid,
Yeah, I was going to bring this up.
and right, and it is one of my favorite character lines of Superman ever, where he looks at Darkseid and he says, "I live in a world of cardboard, always afraid that I'm going to hurt somebody or kill somebody. But with you, I don't have to worry about that, do I? Because you can take it. And now we're going to have a rare opportunity where I get to take the gloves off and show you what I can really do." And then he battles Darkseid. But before that, that line, "I live in a world of cardboard," is an incredible character line.
Yeah.
Because if you think about every move this guy makes, he has to be careful of everything he does. He has to be conscious of it.
We've been
That's
watching this
incredible.
character for so many stories for so many decades, and it gives this context of, wait, he's been holding back.
Yeah.
He's been
And
holding
when he
back
lets
because he
loose,
doesn't want
it's
to,
awesome.
absolutely destroy, atomize someone, but Darkseid
Right.
can take it.
Yeah. And he can. And it was a great fight until he got the upper hand and Batman had to rescue him, of course. But
You got to
but
give
that's
Batman
okay.
something to do.
Yeah, give him something to do. But no, but that was to me was a great, great character line. And I always remember that I interviewed years ago, and I still speak to him, Mark Waid, who wrote Superman Birthright and Kingdom Come and some of the big Superman stories. It's currently writing World's Finest, Batman Superman. I'm sorry. And Mark said to me, he goes, the thing that he loves about Superman is this guy has the power to do absolutely anything he wants, and he chooses to do what's right. That's powerful, I think. I mean, I think that's for kids, especially, that's a really powerful message.
Yeah,
You
and
can
it's
do anything and you're doing the right thing.
it's it's sewn into the new film
Big time.
relatively subtly in
Mm-hmm.
this, again, spoilers, this discovery of this message that maybe his parents sent him to Earth to rule it ultimately,
Right.
to, not necessarily conquer it, but as a superior being to take over the planet. But you know what? Clark was raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent, and that's not who he is.
Right. And he
So
needs his
your
father to
your
point that out
upbringing.
in a sense. Right. It's what you do. It's your action. It's, that's what defines who you are, not what your parents tell you you should be. It's your view on it's a really strong thing. And I love that. One of my favorite moments in that movie is when he's getting ready, when the kids are being attacked and, the country's being invaded. I wish I could remember the name of the country. But he's watching on TV as these little kids are raising a flag with the S on it and
Hmm.
chanting out his name. And he sees where he's been questioning himself because of his parents' message. Suddenly he sees the results of what he's been doing. He's been seeing the inspiration that has been created, or how he's inspired others, rather. And that's, to me, that's a very powerful moment. He has this thin little smile as he's looking at those kids raise that flag. And I think it's one of the most powerful moments of the film, and it says so much about his role in the world.
So
People
there's
are going
more.
to be like, "You talk about Stargate. What is all this Superman stuff?" Good.
Well, it's one of those enduring characters, right? Superman's almost 90, so obviously,
He's
I don't have to ask you. You think there's more Superman stories to be told? What does
next year.
I
We
mean?
get
What?
Man of Tomorrow.
Let's give some advice to James Gunn here, who's definitely watching. What's the best way to build a live action DC universe? As somebody who loved
Letting
animated Justice League, as somebody who loves
yeah.
Green Lantern, you know, it seems like it's so much more tricky than the Marvel universe to get right in live action.
Well, it has been for them because they've, unfortunately, I think the studio's been second guessing them a lot. For instance, when Batman v Superman came out, Warner Brothers insisted on half an hour or something getting cut out of that movie. They put it back in for a DVD release, and it solved like 80% of the movie's problems
Mm.
because it was all the connective tissue that was taken out got put back in. And that's a studio interfering with a movie. And if you're going to hire a filmmaker to make a movie, let him make his movie. The Snyder cut of the Justice League, what did they do? They had Joss Whedon rewrite and refilm the Justice League movie, and it's terrible. And then you see, now granted, they weren't going to put a 4 hour movie in the theaters, but you see the 4 hour Snyder cut and it's brilliant. It's just a work of art.
Now I'm in between. I recently this was tough for me again as a big Justice League animated Justice League fan. I was very excited about the movie when it was in the works. But by the time it hit theaters, I was so unenthusiastic about the world that was being built and the treatment of the
Yeah.
characters. I never saw it. I never
Wow.
saw
Well,
the Joss Whedon version, and then we had that long gap. And does the Snyder Cut exist? And release the Snyder Cut, and it finally came out. And I thought, well, I haven't seen the Whedon version. I don't know what to compare this to, so I hadn't
you don't
seen it
have to
either.
compare it. Just see the Snyder cut. You don't have to
Yeah,
see the Whedon
so I
version.
recently decided, okay, I'm going to watch the short one first to see what everybody was complaining about, having
Okay.
watched documentaries about it, and how the whole process went down. So I've now seen, just within the last 2 weeks, I've seen the theatrical, the Whedon cut, and it plays out like a studio got something that they didn't understand or didn't know what to do with, and they hired somebody else and said, okay, put lots of action sequences and jokes in this and get it under
Mm-hmm.
2 hours, because
Yeah.
that's how we're going to sell tickets.
And they
uh,
didn't.
which is
It
maybe how you sell
failed.
tickets. I don't know, but it's not how you make a film.
It didn't sell tickets. I mean, so that's the point. It was, had they just put out the Justice League movie. Look, I mean, this is sort of a tangent to what you're saying about James Gunn and getting it right and stuff, but James is already getting it right. But these guys, had they just left it alone, if you look at each one of those movies, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, they made plenty of profit. But because Man of Steel didn't cross $1 billion, they immediately said we have to throw Batman in the next one
Mm,
because it didn't cross $1 billion. Well, okay, but you're a new franchise. Don't rush to reach what Marvel did over the course of 24 movies.
mm-hmm.
They were trying to do it in two or one, really, because Man of Steel didn't do what they wanted it to do. So that falls into the whole thing I was saying about interfering, and just let these filmmakers, come up with a plan initially. At least it seems like James Gunn and Peter Safran have come up with a plan. Let them follow the plan. Then, if you approve the plan to begin with, don't interfere. And it seems like they're not. They're letting,
Yeah.
from the outside looking in, they're letting Peter and James do their thing, which is what is necessary, I think, to make it work. And as far as James Gunn, like I said, he got off to a great start with Superman. Peacemaker, I think, is a really interesting show. I really like it. It's very different. But it looks like if he is able to let those characters be who they are and who they're supposed to be, and then bring them together
Mm-hmm.
with those conflicts, that's fine. But you're not having like Batman v Superman, where it's Batman and Superman are both angsty and angry, and Superman looks constipated every time he has to save somebody in that movie. He really
Mm-hmm.
does. It's like he does not look happy doing this. You just bring those different points of view in, and I think you can have a much more entertaining, solid movie. And that's the thing about Avengers, right? Even the first Avengers, which again Joss Whedon directed, and I just watched recently. I did a whole marathon of the Avengers movies. Um, it's Cap is Cap, Tony, Iron Man is Iron Man, Thor's Thor. Everybody's who they're supposed to be, and then it's just watching them bounce off each other. And I granted it got better, obviously, as it went on. But by the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame, it's phenomenal watching those characters just being who they are, interacting with each other. I mean, watching Doctor Strange and Tony Stark, snark off each other is great because they don't feel like it's the same character with just the dialogue split between them. I mean, the same
Yeah.
dialogue split between two characters. They each feel distinct. And I think that's what James Gunn needs to do with these. And he's doing it. I mean, like I said, I can just base it on Superman, what I've seen of Supergirl. It feels like he's letting these things breathe,
Yeah.
basically, without cramming them
Letting them
into
breathe,
some formula.
not needing
Yeah.
to make $1 billion your
Yeah.
first time out of the gate, for sure. I mean, that was one of my initial kind of reactions to the Justice League plan. Was it was clear that Warner Brothers seems to be chasing something and jumping straight to the team up movie.
Yep.
Now, Justice League, there's more sort of, I think, recognition, sort of more cultural understanding of the characters than there was at the time for, you know, Captain America and
Oh, people didn't know those
Iron
guys. Even
Man.
Iron Man. People didn't
Yeah.
know Iron Man
But
until
they're sort of rushing to the team up movie because
right.
they think, you know, we'll do the
Want to
team
make
up
the
movie,
money.
that'll make $1 billion, and then we
Right.
can do the standalones. And you just, the audience doesn't, if they don't know the characters, they don't have the depth. The depth informs those
But there's no
relationships.
reason to rush it. That's the amazing thing. Man of Steel did $678 million. Now, the Snyder people say, oh, it beat, James Gunn's Superman by $50 million at the box office. Who cares? People walked out happier with James Gunn's Superman. The critics liked it more. There's more to it than the box office, and they recognize that. They seem to anyway, that they're not taking that attitude of it didn't make $1 billion, didn't even make $700 million. But you know what? Given the baggage, given of trying to start over again after having just started in 2013 with Man of Steel, again starting it then and then restarting it already in 2025, they took the right attitude of like, let's chill. We made a profit on this movie, a good profit on this movie, and
Hmm.
hopefully Supergirl will do the same thing, and just let it grow.
Yeah,
And
build
then
some
that's all you got
momentum.
to do. Build some goodwill,
Yeah,
with the audience. I mean, where the
absolutely.
audience doesn't walk out feeling like, eh, you know.
Well,
So
we got to wrap up here in the next few minutes and let you get out of here. Ocean Stars wants to know, Ed, do you ever get writer's block? And if so, how do you break through it?
I have to be honest. During COVID, I had writer's block because I was so depressed about everything going on and all, so I couldn't really write. But in general, I kind of don't get it very much, and I'm not trying to make myself sound so special. I'm also not doing fiction. Remember, if I was doing fiction, I think it'd be a lot harder. But
Mm.
because it's nonfiction, it's based on what other people tell me. Uh, it's a little easier, and I think again because I go into each day, looking forward to doing it and not really feeling, oh God, I got to start another day. That helps me not get writer's block. I mean, there have been little bits here and there, but my running joke is people have said to me, have you ever had a midlife crisis? And I tell them I've had like 3 or 4 of them, but I get bored. So I knock myself, it's the truth, I swear. And I just knock myself out of it because I get so tired of hearing myself whine that I knock myself out of it. And that's kind of how it is with the writer's thing, too. It's like, I'll just keep writing until something comes out, if that's the case. It may not be good. Even if I'm not feeling it to write something,
Yeah.
just write it. I mean, I'm saying this to the question that was asked is, even if it's crap, you can always go back and change it. You could throw it away. It doesn't matter. But at least you're putting something on paper rather than sitting there saying, I can't write.
Mm.
I've got writer's block. I can't write. Well, write something. It doesn't matter what it
Yeah.
is.
You don't have to
Even if
show it
it's
to anybody.
shit.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have to get
Even if,
handed into a publisher.
no, it's just do it. I mean, I used to think I was going to be a screenwriter. So in the 80s and 90s, I was cranking out scripts with another co-writer. And that was the thing. It's like sometimes I would just sit there and make sure that I turned out 10 pages. Didn't have to be good pages. They just had to be something on that computer screen had to be there, and that's how I approach it. So I would suggest that, and it's a lot better than sitting there beating yourself up saying, oh, I can't write, because then you convince yourself you can't write. So instead, write something, even if it's crap.
It's
Write
great
it.
advice. It's the best
That's
advice
how
that
I.
I've heard for writer's block. Is even if it's garbage, even if you're never going to use it, just do
What have
words.
you done? You've wasted the time writing it. That's all you've done is you've wasted a little bit of time writing something, but at least you wrote something. You can go back to it tomorrow and look at, Jesus, that's crap. Oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. Let me write this instead, and see what happens. So,
Uh, I want to have you back on if we have a chance and maybe do a deeper dive on Star Trek because we can talk more about Deep Space Nine. And we haven't even made it to the contemporary stuff, which I'm really interested to pick your
oh,
brain
I'd love
about
to talk about it.
where
Yeah. Well,
where
you
Star
may not
Trek
like
has
what I
been
have
in
to say, but
the last decade or so and where it might be going next. Uh, but let's end this on a Stargate question because this is supposedly a Stargate channel. Uh,
sorry.
Raj Luthra wants to know, what are you hoping to see in the new Stargate continuation series? So Martin Garrow's
Wow.
writing a new show right now.
Right.
It's going to head into production in the fall. We're going to see it maybe late 2027, early 2028 on Prime Video. What do you hope this is, and what do you think it maybe ought to be in order to capture what Stargate is?
What's tough is the instinct everyone's going to have is to go serialized until one, because we only, unlike the old days where we got 20 episodes a season or something, we're getting 8, maybe 10, right? I mean, for the new show, I don't think it's going to be much more than that. I don't know if a serialized show, like if that's what they're doing, and I have no idea if that's what they're doing, but it seems like these days everybody's like out for the 8 episode story, the movie, the 8 hour movie. I hope they don't do that. I hope that even if you broke it into like 4 two-parters or something, you know what I mean? But to establish this universe, capture the essence of what Stargate is, make us feel like it's Stargate, but also don't be trapped by the past. move in, you know what I mean, move forward with it, make sure that it's contemporary storytelling, it's contemporary characters, dialogue, the whole bit. But and that sounds like such a, again, such a safe answer, and I don't mean it that way, but it's like you want to make sure that you're watching it feeling like, yes, this is Stargate, but oh, that's an interesting twist I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to approach it. You know, that sort of thing is what I would look for in it.
Yeah.
You know, story wise or anything, I have no idea what they're planning.
And
So it's like I
episodic
have no,
storytelling kind of it feels right, not just because that's what Stargate was for many
right.
years, but also because it seems like it maybe gives you a little bit more room to experiment, tell a few
But we've seen
different
it on Star
stories
Trek.
in the universe.
Haven't we seen it on Star Trek? If you look at that, and we'll, like you said, we'll talk about this another time. But if you compare Discovery, which is 10 episodes of serialized story, which loses its steam, and after a while, some of them are so bad that, you know, it's like, really? That's what we've been building up to? Is somebody screamed and wiped out all the dilithium crystals? Okay. Uh, or if you then go to Strange New Worlds, which is more episodic, more like the original series. If I had a choice, I would say Strange New Worlds. That being said, if Strange New Worlds decides to do a 2, 3 episode arcs, you know, that way, a storyline that spreads over 2, 3 parts and then does another one like that or something, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
And I think Stargate should do the same thing. So,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think we've talked about this before. That's when I think Enterprise really started to shine, was when, you know, season 4 Manny Coda took over and they were doing 2, 3 episode stories.
yep, it was great. I mean, I was so sorry they didn't give him a fifth season. You know what I mean? Because that
Absolutely.
showed the potential of that show in a better way than 3 seasons before it had. So, oh yeah, when you want to talk about Star Trek, you just let me know.
All
So,
right. Well, if the people tell us that they're going to let us talk about Star Trek for an hour, uh,
okay.
yeah, I would love to have you back. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
I
Thanks
appreciate
so much for having
getting
me.
a deep dive into this work, which I again commend to everyone. Chevrons Locked, the official unauthorized oral history of Stargate SG-1, the first 25 years. Hopefully, just volume 1 of a multi-part series as Stargate
It is
goes on.
something I've talked about. I mean, kicked it around. I just have to see if there's a publisher for it and that sort of thing. But I'd love to. I would really love
Yeah.
to continue.
If you
So
guys
we'll
are
see.
interested in the book, look for the link to Amazon in the description for this video. It's an affiliate link. Thank you for supporting Gate World as independent fan journalism. Ed, I appreciate your work.
Thank you,
You
sir.
guys can find Ed right now at womensworld.com, where he's editing the classic TV. What's the official?
Classic TV, Star Trek. I mean, all kinds of
A
stuff.
little bit of
So
everything. Yeah.
yeah, a
It's
little
stuff
bit
that
of
you're going to be
everything.
interested, that you're going to love. So go check that out. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate our moderators, especially for being here today with us at an earlier streaming time. Glad you guys could join us live. Lockwatcher's here. Raj Luthra is here. Jeff from Suns and Shadows. Hellcats is here. Thank you all for being here and for modding. Thank you also to Gateworld's channel members. Again, the support that you guys provide for the channel is invaluable. I appreciate so much. Again, as a kind of independent content creator and fan journalist, it makes all the difference in the world to have your support. If you're interested in being a channel member, look for the join button below any Gateworld's videos on a desktop browser. That'll let you see some videos early, get your name in the credits, that sort of thing, and support what we do here at Gateworld. Otherwise, just share this conversation with a Stargate loving friend. You don't have to throw money at us. Just share it, spread the word, because Stargate's coming back, yo. We're excited right now because we have a big announcement for a new Stargate show. But when it actually gets here and the rest of the peoples find out that there's a cool new show on Prime Video, I think our fandom is going to continue to grow. So that's all I've got everything today. Ed, again, I appreciate your time. We'll have you back. We'll talk more Star Trek.
More Star Trek, more Stargate, whatever you want to talk about. But thank
All
you.
right.
And thank you for doing what you do. Seriously. I think it's great that you're keeping this thing alive in the way that you are. So,
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right,
mm,
guys, coming up, we've got some more conversations here for the rest of May. Next Friday, we're going to have Bryce Ors Ibrecht here to talk about Stargate Network and the Pegasus Project, the virtual 3D Atlantis environment that he's been working on that you might have seen online. We'll also talk about, his fandom, French fandom. And then our good buddy Jeff from Suns and Shadows, who's in the chat, will be our guest. We're going to put Jeff back on camera and talk about Stargate at the end of the month, and then figure out what our plans are from June moving forward. So Thank you guys for being here live. Thank you for watching us after the fact. We'll see you next time.